Emily had just stepped off the crowded bus, clutching her worn handbag as she adjusted her uniform. She looked up at the enormous gate of the Reed estate, elegant, intimidating, the kind of place that seemed to breathe wealth and silence. She had no time to admire the place. It was her first day of work, and she was already 5 minutes behind schedule. She rang the intercom, and a voice, cold and precise, instructed her to come in. The mansion's hallways gleamed. Everything smelled of fresh flowers and expensive polish. A woman dressed impeccably introduced herself as the housekeeper and handed Emily a list of tasks before quickly disappearing. Without delay, Emily began cleaning the grand living room. She moved carefully, afraid to knock over one of the countless crystal vases or art pieces. At one point, she noticed something in the corner of the room, a grand piano, shiny, majestic, as if it didn't belong in a house, but on a concert stage. Emily hesitated. She couldn't help herself. With a quick glance to make sure no one was watching, she ran her fingers gently over the keys. Just a few notes. It was a reflex. Her body remembered a time she didn't dare mention anymore, but her moment of distraction was short-lived. A deep voice startled her. "Who gave you permission to touch that?" She turned quickly, heart pounding. Standing there, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy blue suit, was Alexander Reed, the mansion's owner. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, lowering her gaze. "I didn't mean... This is not your place to play or dream, miss." He glanced at a file. "Emily," he walked past her without another word, but from that moment, something had changed, not in him, but in her. Something long buried began to stir again. The days passed with Emily working quietly, moving through the mansion like a shadow. She was efficient, discreet, and never gave anyone a reason to complain. Except for the piano. She avoided even looking at it again. But at night, after her shift, she would return home and sit on the edge of her small bed, close her eyes, and let the music echo in her mind. Memories of her childhood piano lessons, her mother's encouragement, and the scholarship she had once received. All of it resurfaced like waves crashing against a wall she had built for years. Meanwhile, Alexander Reed watched. Not openly. He wasn't a man who wasted time with staff, but something in her posture when she passed the piano, something in the way her fingers lingered on polished surfaces, intrigued him. One afternoon, while walking through the corridor, he heard soft music, faint, delicate. Someone was playing. He approached the living room silently and saw her. Emily, sitting at the piano, completely immersed, unaware of his presence. The notes were full of emotion, of pain, of beauty. She stopped suddenly, sensing something, and turned. Their eyes met. I thought everyone was gone," she stammered. "I was," Alexander replied, "but now I'm back, and so is the music, apparently." She stood up quickly, embarrassed. "Forgive me, I'll leave now." But he didn't stop her. Instead, he said something unexpected. "Tomorrow night, play something else, at the same time." She froze. "Sir, you heard me." And then he left. Emily's heart pounded. What was that supposed to mean? Emily had barely slept. The sound of the piano, the unexpected request from Mr. Reed, or was it a command, echoed in her thoughts all night. The next evening, the house was strangely busy. Waiters walked back and forth. The kitchen was in a frenzy. Flowers were being arranged in the grand hall, and golden chairs were brought in. A lavish reception was being prepared. Emily cleaned quietly, trying not to draw attention. But something seemed off, and it became clear when the head housekeeper. He pulled her aside. "Mr. Reed requested that you stay until later tonight." Emily frowned. That wasn't normal. As night fell, the mansion was filled with important people, influential, powerful, wealthy, the type of crowd she had only seen from afar on screens in magazines. Businessmen, diplomats, socialites. She hid in the hallway, confused, until Alexander appeared, stern and commanding. "Come with me," he said. They walked through the side of the main hall, past waiters and guests, sipping champagne. Then he stopped by the grand piano, polished, spotlighted, silent, waiting. "You will play," he said without expression. Emily stared at him, shocked. "What? I've told everyone a surprise was coming. They're expecting a world-class pianist, but I'm the maid." He looked her in the eyes. "Exactly. Let's see what they do when the maid plays better than all of them." I can't," she whispered, her hands shaking. "You will," he replied firmly. A hush fell over the room as the lights dimmed and Alexander raised a glass. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "a special performance, unlike anything you've seen before." Emily's face burned. Every guest turned toward her, confused. Some laughed, others whispered. She walked slowly toward the piano, knees weak. She sat, closed her eyes, her heart beat louder than the murmurs in the crowd. And then she played. The room went silent. Each note was filled with emotion, with history, with beauty no one expected. The same hands that had scrubbed floors now danced across the keys like they belonged there all along. No one spoke. No one moved. When she finished, there was a pause, long and breathless. Then applause, thunderous, reluctant from some, genuine. From others, Alexander Reed didn't clap, but his eyes, cold and unreadable, followed her every move. Emily rose, head high, and walked back into the shadows. The days that followed were different, not in Emily's routine. She still scrubbed, washed, polished, but in the looks she received. From the other staff, from the head chef, even from Mr. Reed himself. They weren't looks of kindness or friendship. They were looks of curiosity, suspicion, and fear. Some whispered that she had humiliated Alexander Reed. Others said he had used her as a pawn to mock his guests, but no one dared to say it to her face. Emily, for her part, tried to forget. She didn't want to play again. She didn't want to be seen, but the music wouldn't stop. Her fingers tingled when they passed the piano. Her dreams were filled with melodies. Her heart, somehow, was lighter. One morning as she passed the study, she overheard two voices. "She's just a maid," one said. "No, she's something else," the other replied. "I heard she studied in a conservatory." Emily paused. The voice continued. "He knows it too. That's why he made her play, to prove something." That afternoon, she was called to the office. Alexander stood by the window, arms crossed. "Do you regret what happened?" he asked without turning around. Emily hesitated. "I don't know." He faced her, expression unreadable. "They think I wanted to humiliate them," he said. "But that wasn't the plan." "Then what was?" she asked softly. "I wanted to see if you were who I thought you were." Emily frowned. "I watched you one night," he admitted. "You played when you thought no one was watching. That kind of passion can't be taught." She felt exposed, vulnerable. "Why do you hide it?" he asked. "Because life doesn't care if you're talented," she said. "It only cares if you belong, and I don't." Silence. Then he surprised her again. "There's another event, a bigger one, in the city. I want you to play." Emily stepped back. "No, absolutely not. You would be paid. It's not about the money." "Then what is it about?" She looked him in the eye. "It's about not becoming someone else's show again." She turned and left the room, her heart racing, and for the first time Alexander Reed looked uncertain. Days passed. Emily avoided Alexander Reed whenever she could. She worked in silence, often listening to the echoes of the piano in her own mind. But she refused to touch it again, until a letter arrived, a formal envelope, left on her bed. She hesitated before opening it, her hands trembling slightly. Inside was an invitation, elegant, embossed, official. It was for a gala. The Reed Foundation Annual Benefit, a black tie event for over 200 guests. Millionaires, politicians, celebrities, and her name was printed at the bottom. Special performance by Emily Matthews. She almost tore it up, but instead she stormed into Mr. Reed's office. "You had no right," she snapped, holding the invitation. He didn't flinch. "You deserve to be heard. I told you I didn't want to be your puppet. It's not about me," he said. "It's about you. You think no one sees you, but they will now. I don't need validation from people who look down on me. They won't after this," she laughed bitterly. "You think a maid can step onto that stage and suddenly be respected? That's not how it works, Mr. Reed." He stood and walked toward her. "No, but a woman who plays like you, who pours her soul into every note, can silence an entire room." Emily looked away. "And if I fail? Then fail in front of them, but at least do it with dignity." That night, she stared at the invitation again. She remembered the humiliation at the last event, the cold eyes, the whispers, her hands trembling over the keys. But she also remembered the silence, the reverent awe when she played. And for the first time, a tiny spark inside her whispered, "Maybe I don't need to hide anymore." The night of the gala arrived like a storm. The Reed estate had never looked so opulent. Chandeliers sparkled, violins played softly, and hundreds of guests in glittering gowns and tailored suits filled the ballroom. Laughter floated through the air, and champagne glasses clinked rhythmically. Behind the curtains of the stage, Emily stood in a black gown. Alexander Reed approached her from the side, adjusting his cufflinks. "You still have time to back out." "I'm not here for them," she said calmly. "I'm here for me." He gave a single nod, "Then let them see what I've seen since the beginning." As the room hushed and the lights dimmed, a voice announced her. "Please welcome tonight's special guest, Emily Matthews." Whispers spread like fire as she stepped onto the stage. Murmurs of, "That's the maid. Is this a joke?" filled the room. She walked with steady steps toward the grand piano, raised her chin, and sat. The silence was deafening. Her fingers hovered over the keys. Then with a breath she played. The melody began like a whisper, soft, uncertain, fragile. But it grew, richer, stronger, bolder, a storm wrapped in silk. Every eye was on her. Every breath was held, and when she reached the final note, the ballroom remained silent for a second too long, before erupting in applause. Not polite clapping, roaring, astonished, overwhelmed applause. Some stood, some wiped tears, and in the back of the room, Alexander Reed remained still, a proud smile hidden behind his hand. Emily stood, nodded once to the crowd, and walked off stage without bowing. She had nothing to prove. Behind the curtain, she leaned against the wall and closed. Her eyes, for the first time in years, she felt whole. If Emily's story touched your heart, don't let it stop here. Leave a comment sharing what part moved you most. Subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one. And if you believe in second chances, share this video with someone who needs one today. Because sometimes, the ones you underestimate the most are the ones who shine the brightest.